You may be seated. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Doherty?
Here.
Mr. Hoey?
Here.
Mr. Lay?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Nutter?
Here.
Mayor Samaras?
Here.
Mr. Dakota? 6 here, 1 absent.
Mr. Dakota has the flu tonight, and I think to keep us all safe, he's staying home. But he's watching. Thank you. Next, we have the minutes of approval of the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of Wednesday, January 16, 2019. I need a motion to accept the place on file by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Hoey. Thank you. Now we have permission to enter. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions relative to the items on permission to enter, we can entertain those.
Mr. Hoey.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I just had a few questions, minor questions. One was, I'll be right with you. I just got this up. We had to provide round-trip transportation for one homeless student living in Lowell, Mass, going to Salem, New Hampshire Middle School. I know that's the SPED department pays for that, but I just want people to know that that one thing cost us $23,175, and I'm glad we're paying for it, but I just figure we should hear things like that because we have another one in here that to provide another student transportation from Rutland, Mass to Lowell High that cost us $32,508. So there's a lot of expensive things that the school department gets hit with, and I'm voting for it. I just figure sometimes we should tell people what we're voting on. But the last thing I want to talk about is the last thing on permission to enter, which is the Novak Educational Consulting. It's to provide development and consulting in multi-tiered intervention systems, and it's basically to help out the Greenouch and the Robinson School, which I really love seeing that type of thing on paper because we really have to turn our focus hard on the Robinson School and the Greenouch. So thank you, Mayor, for the time.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Nutter?
Just a question about the, we have a couple, I believe, former employees that are coming back to assist for certain programming. If you could just explain either one.
I'd be happy to. So we have received an early childhood grant, and we are looking at updating our early childhood database, really trying to collect really good data on our students, how they're progressing, how they're moving forward. And so one of those people are going to be supporting in that area. And then the other staff member has been brought back in the past for our early childhood registration. That begins in March, and it's a very, very busy time, and we need extra hands on deck for that. And they're both paid for from the grant.
Thank you.
All set. Any other questions regarding this? All right, I need a motion to approve the permission to enter by Mr. Nutter, second by Ms. Martin. Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent. Approved.
Thank you. Next, we have a number of memorials here. First one is Mary Jane Backey Milanazzo, mother of James Milanazzo, Lowell City Councilor, and Beth Moffett, school nurse coordinator. Next, we have Anne Marie Daly Byrne, retired Morey School teacher. And we have Gloria B. Cody, sister-in-law of the Executive Secretary for Curriculum Instruction, Nancy Cody. And we have Heiner Hank Ways, a retired Stockholster school teacher. And we have Tricia Dudar, mother of Family Resource Center coordinator, Rebecca Dudar. I'd like to have the lights. Thank you. Next, we have motions. The first motion is by School Committee Person Nutter and School Committee Person Martin. Does not need a second. Requesting that the committee enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the committee's contract with both the acting superintendent of schools and the interim assistant superintendent for business and operations. I believe we have some speakers. Madam Clerk.
Megan Moore.
We just need your name and address, please.
My name is Megan Moore. I'm at 226 Baldwin Street in Lowell, and I'd like to speak in a little bit of honor of Acting Superintendent Jeannie Durkin, who I have seen come to the Citywide Family Council nearly every single time. You might have been there every single time. I just didn't notice because we were talking. But I have seen her in the community. I have seen her working hard to listen and create change. I have seen her utilize resources that I was unaware of. Obviously, you know all about that stuff. And I would like to encourage all of us to consider you for our next superintendent position. I have enjoyed seeing you as a resource in the community, and I hope that something could happen with our city that could allow you to be here again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Beth Tripathi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth Tripathi, 30 Talbot Street in Lowell, and I'm also coming forward today to speak in support of extending the contracts for both our interim superintendent and our interim business directors and the motion at hand. And I think it's super important that we seek to keep stability in our leadership at this time to allow our leadership to engage in a thoughtful and deliberative search that engages the community for our next leader, whether that's next year or in 5 years down the road. But also as we undertake changes looking at our school districting and looking at our student assignment policies in the district, I think we will benefit from an experienced leader on hand rather than try to bring somebody in new at the same time we make major changes to our school district assignment policies. We are coming up on our school registration in a few weeks, as the superintendent mentioned, and parents, especially myself as parents who are coming up into the schools now, I want to know that there's some stability in the district and that we're not undergoing 3 or 4 major changes at the same time. So we are very lucky to have the benefit of an experienced leader on hand, and I hope we can retain the excellent and effective leadership we've had so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nutter, you were first on the...
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've been so busy trying to get through this year's budget that I think we lost sight of the leadership that has been provided. I know the newspaper quoted me as saying we should have done this sooner in December. You know, you're talking about people who, you know, when I am downtown on Saturday, I know they're in their office. I know late nights they've been there. They have put in so much valuable time to steady this ship and do what's right for the community. And if we have a chance to extend them, we should look into that. At the very least, we should make it very clear that Ms. Durkin is our superintendent, de facto superintendent since July, and I just, you know, dropped any type of acting term. She has done an outstanding job for us and for the students in this city. So I felt it was appropriate, and I thank Ms. Martin for co-sponsoring the motion.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I obviously concur with my colleague's assessment, and as we had discussed it, and we'll talk about it later, I guess, during the Personnel Subcommittee minutes. I think this motion came up, and we had kind of made the recommendation that we try to go into executive session. That will happen this evening after this meeting, specifically so we can have this conversation and be able to hopefully come out in a positive way and be able to move forward. So it really is with a nod towards timeliness that we put this on the agenda for tonight's meeting so that we can have these conversations with both these individuals who I know we have great respect for and whose work has been exemplary during a very, very challenging time, in the hopes that we'll be able to finalize these contracts and be able to move forward in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further statements? Ms. Doherty, then Mr. Hoy.
Thank you, Ronna. I just would like to say I am in favor of stability. I think we've heard this talked about tonight. We've heard it in the newspaper. You know, a certain number of superintendents over, 12 years or whatever the number is. And I think that stability is important, especially with our leadership. But more important than stability alone is strong, competent, effective leadership. And I think that's what we've seen here these last 6 months from both of these women who have stepped in and just done a tremendous job of helping us get through this financial crisis. And so I do support this motion, and I welcome the opportunity to at least have some more conversation about what that might look like if we're able to continue that kind of leadership and keep that level of stability. Thank you.
Mr. Hoy.
Thanks, Mayor. I only have a small issue with this motion, and I'm going to vote for the motion. I want to go into executive session to make my comments, but I have a motion that's coming up 6-3 that I know for sure that it was the first motion that went into our secretary, Minerva, because I can't even tell you how long ago I put that in. And I don't think we put motions in any particular order. So I was just curious why I thought my motion would be first, because the only reason why I did put that motion in is I heard our acting superintendent say she didn't want to apply for the job of superintendent. So as soon as I seen it, I put that motion in to post the job immediately, because I've made calls to some people that I feel know a lot more about HR than I do, and all I've been told is the best thing you can do when you're looking for a superintendent is to make sure you start a search immediately. Or yesterday. It's almost like buying property, they told me. You should have bought it yesterday. So you got to get out and look. And a big reason why I want to look is I think more than looking, you'll have people that say, oh, you're not going to get anybody to apply for that job. Well, I think this is the school committee that has solved a lot of issues that have went on for 20 or 30 years, and I'm proud to be on it. But I think what we need to do as a school committee is to tell our staff that we already have, listen, because I know we have at least 2 principals. One might be male, one might be female. I'm shaking my head to tell you we at least have 2. We might have 1 or 2 people capable of doing it that's working at our high school. I know we have an administrator that might be capable of doing it. But I want to tell those people that might be a principal that we could look at, please put your name in for it, because I think this school committee should put in some safety precautions for those people. Meaning we shouldn't tell anybody who's applying, but we should, when we finally pick somebody, and it is an internal person, we can say to them, listen, why don't you take the job, because we want you for about a year. And then after that, if you're not happy or we're not happy with you, you can go back to that school that you're running so beautifully. So I'm not going to say names, Mayor. You taught me not to say names, but in executive session I'll say more. And that's all I need to say, but I do want to do a search, and I think we should have done one immediately. Thank you very much for the time.
Anybody else? All right, if you allow me, the issue is, the one thing, first of all, where your motion was placed, I think it's just arbitrary. There's no intent, and it's, for us, doesn't really, it's on the same page. It's on the same page as you know. So I would not look into that as anything else but placement. Yes.
Just one last thing. That's why I just wanted to explain myself,
No,
because
that's
when they
fine.
see that motion, they're saying, what's he putting that motion in for now?
I understand.
Thank you
And
very
have the
much
right to-
again.
You have the right to ask, but I'm just stating.
And
I
thank you.
know the superintendent's secretary, she just doesn't do things in a cavalier fashion. She does them well, and she attends to the issues that are at hand. And It's the way it is. But what I'd like to say is, I think every one of us know that we can be replaced by anyone. I mean, sometimes we may think of ourselves as very important to the situation, but we can all be replaced. There's no question about that. And the present superintendent, acting superintendent, knows that herself. But sometimes what I'm thinking about at this particular point, there comes a time when someone is just the right person for the job. And right now, I just believe our acting superintendent is the right person for the job. It's as simple as that. And I understand, Mr. Hoy, when you say, you know, if we're going to do a search, let's do it right away. That's clear, okay? And it's an important statement. There's no question about that. But I've been in education for a long time, and I've seen a lot of school systems that have a very positive reputation, a good reputation, and sound reputation. The one thing is, I don't fear that there won't be candidates that would run for this job. We're the fourth largest city in the Commonwealth. We're a very successful city. We've got more promise than anyone. We've got a university system, a community college system. Education is in the forefront. And we're privileged as being school committee people to be able to be part of this process. So what I'm really just trying to say that I've seen most school systems, though, there comes a time when some stability is needed. Ms. Doherty is correct. It's not just stability, it's leadership. But in truth, stability is what is needed. We've looked at, all of you have worked with the budget issues, and we've been under a crisis-type operation. And I think we've expected more from this acting superintendent than I think what we should have. But the issue is that we have a right as a school committee to make an internal selection for a time being. Because I strongly believe that if we can, we're not going to put the superintendent on the spot right now, but if we can ask her to stay, to help us do what has to be done to create that stability, create that future. Because, Mr. Hoy, you're right, the school committee has done a lot of things, but we still have a lot to do. And what I'm looking at is to ensure that when we finish, we can say to the people, to the parents of the children of the city of Lowell, we've done the best we can for your children. We're going to ensure that your children have a quality education, a good education, and be safe. It's a big responsibility. But it's my belief. We all have our beliefs, but I think it's all right to put them out on the floor. The public should know where we stand. Mr. Hoey?
One quick thing, Mayor. I agree with everything you just said, but, and we're going into executive session, so I won't say any more till we go into executive session. I'm going to vote for the motion, and I'll say what I think we should do when we get there, so thank you. That's it.
It all comes down to votes then. We all have our independent right to say what we have to say. Mr. Lay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I just want to put my 2 cents in here also in regarding to search. In the past, we have always been doing the search. We have always been in favor of search for the head of schools. And so I believe that the family, the citizens of Lowell, have the right to involve. That's how I feel in the search. So I'm not going to be against Ms. Durgan. I mean, she's been working hard for sure. But I just want to have my comment in there.
I understand what you're saying, but just so you know where I'm coming from, the search process is important. I've been part of the school system too long to not appreciate that or value that. But as I stated, sometimes we need to. If we want to do a really great search, we have to have a great foundation. The better our foundation, the better off we are. Okay. Any further discussion on this matter? Yes, Mr. Hoey.
Just one thing about that great search, Mayor. I don't believe we have to search the whole country. I believe you'll find it right here in our own system, or the Merrimack Valley, or maybe out to Townsend. I don't think we have to search that far. I think I could do a search for about $500 and use the Lowell Sun. We have to protect the people that want to apply for this. I've talked to people in my lifetime, why don't you run for, they don't want to run for school superintendent, and they should. We have, like I said, I'm not going to repeat everything. We have some great candidates right inside our system and living in Lowell. We just got to open our eyes and try to protect them so they can take the job and maybe last 3 years. They don't want to take something and not be able to fall back to their particular school. And I have no more to say. Thank you for the time, Mayor.
No. But, and at the same time, when you have something in front of you, those systems that have been very progressive have made those choices. Mr. Lay?
Jim Smith, I just want to add to that also that I think we owe the city to find what's best for them. I mean, so that's another thing I want to add. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, we're all set with that? All in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, next we have my school committee person, Nutter. School committee directs superintendent to add 3 plumbers plus 2 HVAC techs for the district in the 2019-2020 budget. Need a second? By Mr. Hoey, Mr. Nutter.
Thank you. You know, before tonight's meeting, I was down the hall at the Board of Health meeting, which had a list of schools with issues regarding boilers and regarding plumbing and regarding roof repairs. And this has been going on in this city for a long time. I spoke with Mr. Underwood. I do remember a previous school committee that had put plumbers and HVAC technicians on our payroll in our high school. That has been cut since then. We need to have these people. They can be 1705 union employees who are detailed to the school department, much like the police have SROs detailed to the school department, much like the DA's office has state police detailed to them. They would be detailed to Mr. Underwood. He would decide whether they stay at the high school, maybe 1 or 2 of them, and the others would respond to calls as needed throughout our system. It is something that I am tired of having to explain to parents that I know the heat didn't work today, but we had 3 other schools where the heat didn't work today and we didn't have anybody to send. I know the bubble has been broken for weeks. A ticket was put in, but it's going to take a month or 2. The DPW does not have the staff. I spoke to the manager on this. She thinks it would be an enormous assistance to the city if we're able to do this. I know that technically the responsibility for the maintenance of the building is on the cities, but it is our responsibility to provide our staff and our students especially with the best possible educational experience. And that means a warm classroom. It means not having to walk up 2 flights of stairs to use a bathroom or to get a drink or to wait weeks to have a sink repaired. We are at the position right now to do this, and I think we should do it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I've got a comment and then really some questions. I, like my colleague to the left, would love to have heat and bubblers that work. I know everyone in this room. I know all our staff and our students and our parents would love that too. I don't know how we have the means to pay for 3 plumbers when we didn't have the means to pay for our library aides. I don't see that taking on responsibility that duly belongs with the city. I think we need to continue to press the city to do the maintenance, the due diligence. It's kind of like you're a tenant, you know, and you say, well, the landlord's not fixing the roof and it's leaking, so I'm going to fix the roof. But meanwhile, you really can't even buy your food. We don't have the resources to focus on education. We are not in the building maintenance business. We're in the education business. And I'm just not sure how this is going to help us, because we're going to be facing a budget where we have a whole list of things that we want. and not the money to pay for it. So that's where my concern lies. I don't see that adding plumbers, it's going to be taking away from social workers, or is it going to be taking away from school psychologists or the library aides? How are we going to be able to include that in our budget? We'll be going to the city for the resources that they don't seem to have. I'm not supporting it, unless someone can change my mind about how we have the resources to pay for plumbers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think that I had a number of reactions to this motion. I do certainly remember when we had plumbers who were specifically on the school department budget. It was, as I recall, a pretty specific situation that they were dealing with, kind of across the district. I will also say that, as I recall, we were, the union did file a grievance that I believe we lost as that process kind of unfolded. So there's concerns around that. To Ms. Doherty's point, $250,000, and that's conservative for 5 new positions with benefits. $250,000 is we cannot pull that from our budget, at least at this point. I know we're looking at the next budget year, but unless there was a pretty dramatic change, I just don't see how we can take education dollars and apply them to this need. I know, like no one else here, I do not pretend that we don't need this help and that we don't need to get our schools in order, but I just feel that this is not the appropriate way for us to take on this burden and this expense when it really doesn't, it shouldn't be spent, we shouldn't be spending education dollars to get there. Over and above that, because I know there are a number of these motions, I also want to say that historically, I've always felt that it's inappropriate to make budgetary demands outside of the traditional budget process. At this point in the year, trying to add in things to next year's budget before we have any idea or any sense of the comprehensive kind of package we're going to be looking at when we get to budget time, I just feel that's not appropriate. I've said this many times over in the past, that unless you're looking at our budget as a comprehensive piece, that just picking and choosing things that we want to, kind of arbitrarily put into the budget, I just don't think that that's an appropriate budgeting process. So I will not be supporting this motion. Again, not because I don't think we need it, not because I don't think that certainly the status of our schools requires it, but because A, I don't think we can justify educational dollars being spent on it, and B, I just think this is an inappropriate time to be making individual requests or demands of the next school year's budget. Thank you.
Under ed reform, one of the few things that the school committee can actually do is propose budgets. And we're looking at next year's budget, and I can't say we have to do this. I can bring in a motion to have it voted. But if we continue in the city to do everything the way we've always done it, we'll be spending more time at the Board of Health meetings than anywhere else until something gets condemned. The fact is, under the first proposal that's out there right now by the governor, we can't afford it in next year's budget, much more than the city. And we'll be finding out in the next day or two that we're going to ask the residents of this city to increase their taxes somewhere between, conservatively, 6 to 8% to fund a high school project. But we're going to tell them, sorry, we can do that, but we can't get a bubbler fixed for your kid. We can't have a bathroom working. We can't have heat in the classroom. We cannot continue to run this system the way we've always run it, because our buildings are being condemned because people don't want to change the way we do things. So all I'm asking is we look to step outside the box. This is a suggestion. Talk to 1705 union people. See if they will allow their people to be detailed to the school department. I spoke briefly with the city manager. She was on board with this. We have to do something.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey, then Ms. Martin.
Thank you. I'm still trying to convince myself how I feel on this motion, but I do want to say a few things. I love the motion because we're getting this discussion, but my concerns would be kind of like, are we going to, if is it going to be under the maintenance of effort that the city's paying for these spots eventually? Maybe not right away, but that's where I'm a little nervous what we're going down. If we pay for these, or we're going to have to pay for the SROs again. And that's my only concern there. But at the same time, maintenance of our schools, I mean, again, the past two school committees have worked hard on maintenance more than ever before. I think Mr. Nutt is right to say we're going to have to deal with some health issues. We all think we're getting through an easy winter, and we're not. It's early in February, and watch out what that can happen in February and March. And plumbers are very important. I remember trying to put a couple of electricians in the school, but that was more or less to try to take care of teaching kids how to be electrician, and there's state laws, and you got to get with the vocational school to even allow you to do that. But I kind of like this motion. I think I'm going to support it, even though I think it's a little dangerous about the indirect cost and all that. But and also to have an HVAC tech, it's very important, because even though a plumber can kick around and kind of figure out about heating and figure out most of that stuff, these are two different titles, very important, because a lot of your HVAC guys up on a roof, they also take care of the heat, because that system will be AC and heat. So I'm kind of leaning toward voting for this, and I think I might support it. So that's all I need to say right now.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think I would just like to, just in terms of revisiting, to be clear, the school committee's duty is not to create a budget. Despite we may think we do, we don't. We are responsible for approving a budget that's proposed to us. That's an administrative function that happens by the professionals. Every year, we receive the recommendations of the administration. It's our duty, and we take it, I know, very seriously, to go line by line from that budget. We approve some things, we don't approve other things, we make recommendations to add things. That's the way the process works. There's no single school committee member who's sitting in a corner writing their own budget for the Lowell Public Schools. It's a collective process that we're all part of, but that is led by the professionals at the Lowell Public School Department. So I think that for a committee to, at this early date, be forcing things into a budget when we do not have a comprehensive vision of what that budget is going to look like is simply not appropriate, despite whether we did it last year, 10 years, however many years.
Mr. Hoy, then Mr. Nutt.
Yeah, one last thing. We do have a priority list of things that we had to cut and we might return when we get some money to put them back together. And I did leave one thing out when Ms. Doherty said we don't have library aides. Well, I'm, again, love to bring up the point that two schools that need a lot of help, Sullivan School and the Robinson School, I think they should be at the top of our list to make sure they have a dean of discipline to help in those two schools. So we could all come up with things like that. I don't want to do anything before we help the Robinson School. It's in my head. And the Greenouch next. I think it's so important, it's crazy. But this here is as big as any other issue. Plumbing and the heating, and the parents are scared, and the bubblers and all those things. So again, I hope my colleagues just take a good look at what's wrong right now. And this is for 19-20 budget. And maybe we can talk to the city and work with Eileen that goes under the maintenance of effort. So thank you, and that's all I'm going to say on that issue. Thank you again.
You know, I find it ironic that I'm being told that we shouldn't bring in motions like this when the same colleague who's telling me that brought in a motion to ask why a summer program was being cut before it had even been brought forth to the committee. So we all have our items that we like to choose to bring in and talk about. And I think based on the fact that we have 9 schools that we have submitted emergency repair requisitions for, that we have more than that have heating issues, that we constantly have to go to the Board of Health because our staff is talking about how cold our kids are, or how hot our kids are, or how bathrooms don't work. I don't think this motion's out of order. I think it's time that we do something to help our students.
All right. If you allow me at this particular...
If you'd like to go first,
No,
it's
sorry.
fine.
No. Ms. Martin?
certainly as a fan of irony, and I employ it all the time, I would just like to point out one particular difference to Mr. Nutter's reference. The program we were talking about was funded by this Lowell Public School Committee. The decision was made at central office to eliminate it midway through the year. I brought it up because both staff and individual parents who had participated in the program were asking the question, why isn't this program happening? So it is slightly different than trying to pick and choose programming. This was something that had already been approved and with no consultation was eliminated. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lake?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think Mr. Nutter had a good point this is a good thing that he's been thinking outside the box. And though I agree with Ms. Dorothy that it is important, however, we do have our priority would be within the classrooms. And we do have a list of what to do, what to bring back once we have money. And it seems like we look like we may have pretty good amount of money coming in next year. I feel positive about that, and I think we all feel positive about that. May we put this add this to the list of the important things that we need to fill when we have the money? Would that be something that agreeable?
It would still have to be voted on.
So, and in terms of time, when's a good time to put the budget in? I don't know if there isn't any better time, just because once we have the budget in, we are so busy in terms of figuring out the budget. So I think the good time is probably now.
Okay. All right, if you allow me at the point, the issues that Mr. Nutter brought up, there was nothing that was wrong. In other words, he was correct in some of the issues that we're faced in our schools, no question. But let me tell you where I come from. I come from a time when I had the HVAC person at the high school, okay? But the thing is, I also come from a time when the school system had plumbers, HVAC people, painters, carpenters, and electricians. You had the whole gamut. And I wish I could say at that time everything was done well. Wasn't, okay? But the thing is, I find it hard to support this by asking to put this in the budget at point. We're expecting a large amount of money, but the thing is, we have to look at the Lowell school system and what our needs are, as far as I'm concerned, for the children of the city of Lowell, not the buildings. And if the city manager said she supports this because it won't cost the city any more money. The thing is, I think the city is responsible. I think what we've been doing, I think what the school committee has pushed, and the city council has pushed for better handling of our not construction, but our repair of buildings. Because for many years, in other words, this problem is not new. This problem has been there for the past 30, 40 years. In the last 20 years, especially with the various budget cuts that have come across the state, the different type of tax cuts, I was present at some 35 budget hearings. And just whenever there was a shortage, it was always building maintenance that it was hit first, because we're trying to save a teaching position, an aide's position, what have you. But the thing is, we've paid the price, and Mr. Nutt is correct. We've paid the price at this particular point. Do we want to keep doing the same thing? I'm saying to you, Mr. Nutter, that I don't want to do the same thing, but I want the city, for my belief, is to have more responsibility in dealing with this, because this should be the city asking for more HVAC people, the city needing more plumbers to do that. If not hiring these people, having a contract that's immediate, that the superintendent can call, the people in charge of custodial affairs for the city can call up and say, we have this problem at such and such school. The problem has to be solved. I just cannot support this type of approach to a budget. That's my statement. Mr. Hoey, then Mr. Nutter.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, Mayor, as far as this issue of maintenance or the plumbers. And the budget problems that we have. When Mr. Nutter, at the end of his speech about this motion, said the city manager thought it was a good idea. I think if we take a step right now and go for this motion, I think we're sending a message to her also that we know how big your issue is, because we're the ones that opened the can of worms here over maintenance. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to get into that again. But this motion to me shows that he's trying to go outside the box, like Dominic said, but he's also trying to help the city manager, and she thinks it's a good idea for right now. I think it's a good risk to take and move on and vote on this up or down one way or another.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nutter?
You were at the council meeting last week when the city manager brought forward under informational, where she showed that the city was going to be receiving roughly about a $730,000 increase in unrestricted local aid. However, the school department, and she stressed it, was getting a lot more than that proposed by the governor. So if anyone thinks that the city council is going to have an abundance of money, they have not shown they'll be able to. We're asking the taxpayers to foot the bill for the new high school. Mr. Hoey a few weeks ago mentioned property tax increase. They're going to get one. And they deserve to send their students to a building where they can flush a toilet, get a drink, and have heat. And it's, cut them all you want. We haven't done it before, and look where we are. So if we want to just keep repeating, don't change anything. Just keep doing what we're doing until finally somebody, the state, the Board of Health, or somebody condemns one of these schools, and then we're in bigger trouble than we are now.
No, I don't accept the fact that we're not doing anything. The thing is, nothing has been done in the past. And what we're doing is an active involvement of the city council and the school committee to do this. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we all have a different approach as to what is out of the box. When you said that this is thinking out of the box, I stated that the school department for many years had all of those services. They had it. So this is nothing new. But the question is about responsibility. And I believe the city is responsible for it. And that's it. I believe we're responsible to ensure that our children get the best education possible. We don't have library aides in our elementary schools and middle schools. That's a tragedy. And I think more of that tragedy than the idea of whether we should hire a plumber over the city. That's my Mr. Nutter and Mr. Lay.
I'll let Mr. Lay go because I was going to ask to move the motion and have a roll call vote.
Yes.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nutter. I'm just curious, 3 plumbers plus 2 HVAC tech. How much money are we thinking about? Is it something?
It's approximately what Ms. Martin had stated.
$250,000?
Somewhere around $250,000.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Move the question with a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Doherty?
No.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
No.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
No.
Mr. Dakota? 2 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, motion fails.
Next, we have, let's see if I may place, by Mr. Hoey, motion to post the superintendent's position immediately. Need a second by Ms. Doherty.
Second.
Mr. Hoey.
Thank you. I don't have much to say anymore. That's what I feel we should do, post it immediately. And we don't have to do a nationwide search. Just get it out there so people know we're looking for different candidates. And I think when we get an executive session, we'll iron all this out. So thank you. I just wanted to say something about that. My opinion is we should be searching immediately. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Doherty.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to say that if we do need a superintendent, and I know that Acting Superintendent Durkin has at least expressed to me she was not interested in staying on in the role. I agree with my colleague. We should be opening the search as soon as possible. I don't know if you would be open to kind of a friendly amendment if we need, to do the search immediately, to post. And I would also we have a meeting next week, perhaps get some information together about what the Blue Ribbon Committee might look like so that we could make some other steps in terms of moving forward if it is needed. That would be my suggestion. I don't know what your thoughts are
Zoe?
about that.
I thank you, but I don't believe there's a need to amend the motion. It's either you like it or you don't, because I think Miss Martin and Jerry Nutter's first motion will settle all this stuff that I'm trying to do anyway, so I'll just wait for executive session. I just wanted to bring that motion up and vote on it, but obviously there's not enough support, and that's okay, but I want to be on the record of saying I think we should do a search for superintendent immediately. Thank you, and that's all I have to say.
I'd say that, to my colleague's point, our executive session obviously is scheduled tonight in light of that we want to get this done as quickly as we possibly can. I think the reality is that if we come out of that, we'd have to be making that decision to go into an immediate search, which is, I think, in everyone's best interest. I mean, again, I don't know if the maker of the motion is comfortable with an amendment that would allow us to say at the conclusion of executive session, the committee will make a recommendation to enter into a superintendent search immediately,
Sounds good to me.
just so we have the option.
We don't need a vote. We're all set. We don't need a motion. Okay, thank you. All set. All right, next we have another motion by Mr. Hoey. Request the superintendent work with the Lowell High School administration to develop a report regarding the usage of cell phones at Lowell High School. I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Lay, Mr. Hoey.
Thank you again, Mayor. And Dominic, thank you for the second. All I want is a report. I mean, I've had a few people that are very close to me saying cell phone use is out of control. First thing I do is call my senior granddaughter. Hey, is cell phone use at the high school out of control? I know what she tells me. She needs her cell phone to help do her studying and scheduling because she's getting offers from college and everything, and they need their phone to get home. But most of the ones that I hear from need it for research or helping them out. It's like their little iPad right in front of them. If I had a cell phone when I was in school in the business courses, I would have been doing the things I shouldn't have done with a phone. But all I want is a report. Ms. Durkin and Mrs. Bastide get together and just give us a report to make sure it's not out of control. I don't believe it is. I didn't bring up the middle schools because we are visiting these schools, and I see that I think they have it under control in our middle schools, and I feel good about that, because the kids need their phones when school's out to make sure that, they might need to call their parents to get picked up or whatever. So, again, I don't believe phone use is out of control in the high school. Maybe someone will give us some input on that, but I believe a report would be very helpful. Thank you.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey, just for a point of clarification, what would you be looking for in that report? Would you like to know what the policy is at Lowell High, and then also the number of discipline incidents that occur revolving around cell phones? Would that be helpful? Just want to make sure that I provide you with what you need.
Yeah, what I'm looking for more or less is the people that work there, Mrs. Bastide and the house masters, house leaders, to just come back and tell us basically, this is what, we're following the policy, but this is what we do, this is what's helpful for us. Because when I visit the schools, you try to find out what's going on, what do they do? And I didn't see in our middle schools, I really didn't catch any cell phone use. But when I have employees telling me that you got to do something about it, it's out of control. I know where I worked, it was very important to have phones under control. You didn't want to lose them, so one of the bad guys got it and all that type of stuff. So I think Mrs. Bastide is already working with groups of children down there. That my granddaughter's, she talks about it with groups of 40 and 20. So I think a report coming back to us, that's all I'm looking for, I think will satisfy me anyways. Thanks.
Yes.
Hi. So I just wanted to add that I don't think cell phone usage in the Lowell High School is it's not extreme, but to an extent it's sometimes all I see in the hallways or sometimes even in classrooms. I have one class where my teacher completely, if she sees a phone, she snatches it, she just grabs it, and honestly it makes a difference in the class. I get more fulfillment in like the class lesson when I don't have my phone around. So I'm not sure if you guys want to completely ban cell phone usage or limit it. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, all set? Thank you. All right, next we have a motion by Mr. Nutter. Request the mayor have the city solicitor schedule an executive session to update the school committee on election lawsuit status. 4 individual members are named, so is the entire body called school committee, yet the city lawyer and city council have excluded these names, people, and the entire school committee from the entire legal process.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hoey. Mr. Nutter.
As some of my colleagues may know by now, I attempted to attend the executive session last night. Being a named member, as the school committee has been named, I felt that we should be allowed to participate. And Councilors Elliott, who was running late, Councilor Mercia, Councilor Leahy, were all in support of that. However, the city solicitor advised them before the meeting, because the councilors offered to put it up to a vote whether to allow me in or not. But the city solicitor advised them that under the charter, the city council are the only ones who can change the voting of the way Lowell votes by ordinance. So the school committee, even though individuals and as a group is named, and the election commissioners are not invited to participate in the discussion on how to deal with this, but once they decide on what they're doing, before they take it to the plaintiffs, apparently, they will host a meeting with us and let us know, give us an update. That's what I was told last night. I found it interesting that even though the election commissioners were not allowed to be in the meeting, or the school committee, who were all named, a department head, the woman who runs the election office, was allowed to be in that meeting. So I kind of found that a little strange, but that's what we have been told, so we don't need to, proceed with this. I got our answer last night when I attempted to crash the meeting. Thank you.
Could I address some of the, okay. All right. First of all, regarding Eder, she's an important contributor to the mediation hearings and has been asked to be part of that process. But first of all, it was already planned to have a meeting with the school committee to update the school committee on the status of the case, as well as in a separate meeting, the election commissioners. But for your information, I'm in the mediation. In fact, I'm going to a mediation hearing tomorrow with the federal judge and the city solicitors, the 2 solicitors that are dealing with this issue. And the one thing the judge stated very clearly, he did not want to read anything about what was happening in mediation in the he said, local paper or your radio station, or he said, whatever you have. No, it was, and I think it was looking at me more than the city solicitors, because I'm part of the political background of the city. And he empowered us to be able to go back to, in a sense, our bosses, the remainder of the city council. But he wants it held in check at this particular point. So the solicitor was speaking from that framework, because I asked her afterwards. And I've also been privy to that, those issues and the response by the federal judge. If I'm going to listen to anybody, I'm going to listen to somebody in the federal court. But you're correct. We have to give this information to the school committee and the other groups.
You could ask the judge if they could remove us if we have no say in the matter. I don't know why we're even listed, but, and by the way, for clarification, I own 0% of WCAP. I also get no salary for my Saturday morning appearances, but it's not my radio station.
No, excuse me, but I'm not.
And Sam would be very offended.
No,
Sam Polton.
I understand that, but no, I'm just repeating to you what the judge said. Okay, looking, as I said, at me rather than the 2 city solicitors. I just don't want to hear about it, and his main emphasis was he didn't want to read about it in the local paper, and that we honor the privacy going on between the mediation groups. But I think, there's a direction that's being established by the council that we'll be able to provide that information to the school committee. You're correct. You should receive that information. You need that information. It's important for the future of the city, okay? But basically, that's what has transpired. Thank you. Next, we have by Mr. Nutter, School Committee requests 2019-2020 budget includes some form of rotating library aides in our elementary middle schools and restore a producer role for a television studio and direct program to include training on the new van. Need a second by Mr. Lay. Mr. Nutter.
I know, again, this may seem like it's inappropriate to some, but a lot of this was on our wish list. I don't believe we need to rehire every library aide. I think we can use this as an opportunity to, maybe do this, have library, 1.5 days and rotate between 3 schools or something along those lines. And that was after speaking with a couple of library aides who gave me that idea. So it's just something to look at. As far as the television studio, a couple of years ago, a lot of money was spent upgrading that studio. The city this year spent $150,000 to update the van.
Correct.
The fundraising that was done in the past and the promises made, need to be honored, and we need to, we've had students who have gone from there, into the television production world and have succeeded. It's a good program. And so I just, again, it's just something we should keep in mind as we prepare the next budget. Thank you.
These are programs that are part of the school system, so. Mr. Hoey?
At the end of the motion there, when he talks about the television studio and the direct program to include training on the new van, what I've noticed lately on Channel 22, if you notice, when you hit that, I like to go, that's how bad my life is. I hit Channel 22 to watch the children sing sometimes. Christmas shows will be on there. And right now, the TV's black. It shows you nothing, Channel 22. So I have some concerns about that because I don't want to lose that channel. So I'm glad, I just wanted to bring that up because I keep hitting 22 and nothing's happening. So I'm not sure if it went dead. But I think when that van gets moving around, going to schools, Channel 22 will be very important to us. So, Mayor, you might want to look into that, Channel 22, to make sure we haven't lost it, because it looks like we have.
No, we can't afford to lose that.
Thanks.
But, Mr. Nutter, this is, the other one was a direction, directing the superintendent, but this is a request. You satisfied with the request to provide you with the information regarding the potential of these programs? Okay. Anybody else? Ms. Martin?
I would just say again, these are things that I think we can all recognize are important, and there are other things that were on our priority list that haven't been able to come back that I'm sure we'd want to discuss too. Again, I wouldn't be supporting it now only because I think it should be part of the bigger conversation.
But the way I interpret this, the superintendent will provide information regarding the direction in this area. Okay. Do you want a roll call? No. Okay. All right, thank you. Next, by Mr. Nutter, School Committee requests superintendent to bring forward a budget presentation and meeting schedule for the 2019-2020 school year. Second, by Mr. Hoey.
Ask and ye shall receive. Thank you very much.
All right.
What a service, huh?
What I'd also like to do is before this meeting, so probably at our before our second meeting in March, at a finance subcommittee meeting as a open budget discussion to talk about inviting the public and stakeholders and our fellow school committee people to see what we'd like to see in the next budget. We'll have a little better idea, and people can come and share their ideas of of things that we need to look for in the budget. We can do it at a finance subcommittee meeting.
You probably should hold it here,
Yeah,
to allow
right,
public
before the,
access.
Yep.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Ron. I think it's a great idea. I'm just wondering if March might be tricky because it's Knowledge Bowl, and we have so many meetings in the month of March. If
it would be before the school committee meeting, before the regularly scheduled school
okay.
committee meeting at 5:30.
I thought you meant before the next meeting, try to do it in March.
In March,
Okay,
at
got it.
5:30 before the next.
So basically, you just want at least the beginning of that, if we just allowing an hour, so,
Yeah, yeah, just an hour.
Okay.
And the second meeting
okay.
in March.
Yeah, all right.
Only because I may not be here for the first one.
Okay, thank you. All right, next motion by Mr. Nutter. School committee vote to keep and fully fund General Labor Council position 2019-2020 budget and schedule an executive session on a quarterly basis for regular updates on all legal matters. Need a second? I'm sorry.
Before we do that, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Dakota is not here this evening, and he asked me if I would defer this to the next school committee meeting. So with your permission, I'd just
thank
like
you
to
for doing that.
defer this.
These are important. I'd like to have Mr. Dakota here. Thank you. Next, by Mr. Nutter, school committee vote to direct superintendent to not fund adult education as part of the school budget for the 2019-2020 school year. In addition to the estimated $630,000, pardon? Oh, keeps me honest, I guess. In salaries not credited towards net school spending and not required by law. The district is charged another $27,000 for the parking against net school spending. Need a second on this? Mr. Hoey? We have a speaker?
I just want to be clear on something before we have the speakers come up, okay? I am not suggesting that we eliminate adult education. What I am suggesting is that, we talk about having the city be responsible for what they're responsible for. We want them to be responsible for the plumbers and the HVAC people. But the law is quite clear. We are not responsible for adult education. The city is responsible if they want to fund it. So what I'm looking to do is basically the same thing we did with transportation. And that is, if the city wants us to run an adult ed program, give us that money as a separate line item. I mean, let's be perfectly clear, folks, okay? When our budget this year, we received $150 million from the state in Chapter 70 funding. The city is responsible for 47.4 to meet their net school spending obligations. The city gave to us $15,700,000 in cash. Of that, $11,000 is spent for transportation, and another $630,000 is spent for adult education, leaving us with $4.1 million in cash contribution from the city. So if we just get the city to give us the $15 million, under the governor's proposed budget, their requirement is an additional $2 million. If they want to take $650,000 roughly because of the increases in salaries and fund that as a separate item, we have a world-class adult education program, bar none. But if we're going to hold the city responsible for plumbers and HVAC technicians, then we ought to hold the city responsible by law, again, to adult education. Let them fund it as a separate line item. We'd be happy to run it. They can put it under education and give us the additional $650,000. Also, under maintenance of effort, we are charged $27,000 for parking for adult education. That's part of the maintenance of effort that we're charged. We're charged over $300,000 for parking. The city council voted to have the school administration move downtown, and then they take $300,000 for parking when we could have parked up at the Rogers School for nothing. But anyway, I just think that we should If we're going to hold them accountable for some program, we ought to hold them the same accountability straight across the board. Thank you.
We have a speaker. Madam Clerk.
Betty McKinnon.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Nutter. I just want to share a couple of figures with everybody, just for a point of clarification. The city budget, or what comes to adult education, to fund adult education from the city/school department, is $486,274. I'm not sure about the figure that you were quoting. The $27,000 is used for our nighttime program, which is even larger than our daytime program, to allow students to come down and park in the garage at night and be able to go out safely into the garage and at the dismissal time. State funding, we spend a lot of time, multiple hours, applying for various state and federal grants, and we've been very successful in doing so. In fact, we're the largest funded adult education program out of the 100 or so centers in the state. We've been very successful with that. So the state grants that we are getting this current school year, $760,734. Federal grants, $314,486. We get a small testing grant because we run monthly high school equivalency testings, is for $5,287. We have a new grant, which I think Superintendent Durkin has mentioned before. It's to fund a training program for second language learners. It's being held up at Duville Life and Wellness Center. It's a combination, a partnership effort between adult education, Lowell Public Schools, the International Institute, Middlesex Community College, and Duville. So we're training a number of second language learners to be prepared. They'll actually be offered jobs at Duville upon completion of their exams. So the grant total is $1,158,727 for a total of $1.645 to educate over 1,500 adult learners in a given year. So we get a matching funds, I might add. So the matching funds are $1.158727 to the $486,274 from the city. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
As I stated, I'm not looking to cut adult education. I'm just looking to have it funded by the city differently, so we're not using money that could go to student programming for adults.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Hoy, then Ms. Martin.
Thank you. This is to make sure we have the right place, the Fred Abbasi place. Is that what we're talking about? Okay. To me, it's something I couldn't touch right now. I couldn't never vote for the motion, and I know Mr. Nutt is right. Guarantee you he's right about every part of it, that the city should probably be paying for it. But at this time where the city's hurting for money, I would be afraid that if we do this and we don't put it in our budget for 2019-20, we might lose that program, and that's what I'm afraid of. So I'm not going to support this motion, and I look at like renting the Bon Marché building. I could look at that like when we got priorities to maybe get us out of there first to save that kind of money, and then when we need to save more, maybe someday go back and look at this. But I feel we educate children, especially if they're special ed, up to the age of, and I don't know all the policies, take you forever to try to learn all of them, but I believe we educate children up to about the age of 21, most kids, and then regular kids that have no problems usually graduate from about 18 years old. I'm going to be 65, and I didn't graduate from high school. I had to go in the U.S. Army to get a high school diploma so I can go to Newbury Junior College. But I just think that I've never seen a program in this city that can match this program. So that's my concerns. I'm afraid to lose this program. And I know Mr. Nutt is right, so I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, but I always vote in favor of the adult education. It's too important to me. I think we have a right to educate all our everybody, not just students, everybody that lives in the city of Lowell that might have dropped out of school. But I see the pride in the faces of those people that walk across the stage. I know Miss Martin's looking at the shoes, but I normally look at how proud all those people are. I couldn't vote for this. I just don't feel safe. I want to make sure we protect the Fred Abbasi Adult Education Place, and thank you, Mayor, for this time.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think that, I understand the premise behind this, but as we've had this conversation before, I really do believe that the investment we make in adult education is an investment in our regular students. These are their parents, these are their family members, and giving adults the opportunity to complete GEDs, to complete high sets, to complete ESL, these are the kind of certifications and credentials that they'll need so that they can be successful, so that their children can then be successful. So I really do see a very direct link between what we're doing in adult ed to our goals overall for all of our students in the Lowell Public Schools. I think it's also important to note, when you're looking at a program where we're making basically a $500,000 investment and getting a 3-to-1 reward on investment, that's pretty impressive. For every dollar that the city school department is spending on this, we're getting $3 of grant funding from various sources that support this effort. We don't see that in a lot of our programming. So I think that that's certainly a testament, certainly to the quality of the program, which I agree with my colleague is recognized throughout New England as absolutely the best program of its type anywhere. And also to the dedication of the staff who are doing this grant writing, doing this research, and ensuring that they have the talented staff and all of the other materials they need to be successful as a school and certainly for their students. So I think that, again, having this conversation at this point, I think as there'll be other kind of budget conversations we'll have as we move forward. Adult education, I think, is one of our great success stories, and I think if we were ever to lose it, it would be a devastating blow, not just to the district, but to our community as a whole.
Ms. Doherty.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have to say right out of the gate that my colleague, Mr. Nutter, makes a very compelling argument. It makes me think of the grant that we got for over $500,000 that we never actually received a dime for. It's just blatantly unfair. But on the other hand, as someone who has been around and watched our schools and seen the tremendous work that the Adult Education Center does every day, and I think I agree with Ms. Martin, it does impact the children in our schools because of the importance it plays with their families and their parents. And I would also agree that my biggest concern is if we don't fund it, there will be cuts to it. And I'm not surprised that they get a huge amount of state and federal grants because it is a star program throughout the state. I believe it is the largest adult education program in Massachusetts and has been one that is renowned for the work that it does. And I think that work comes back to our community in so many ways, not just the families that are impacted. So even though it is unfair and it is the right thing in terms of, the funding, we could use that money for the K-12. I would not be able to support this, just my fear that the little that it does get from, given what they receive in grants, that would be eroded because we have shown a commitment to this program and we need to stay the course. So I would not be supporting it either, but I think it's a compelling argument. Thank you.
Again, I'm not looking to eliminate the program. I'm looking, the argument that we can't fund plumbers and HVAC, because that's not our job. We don't, it's not our job to make sure our kids can go to the bathroom and stay warm. But it is our job, even though the law is very clear. I mean, if you recall last year when I brought this up, the mayor at that time threatened that the city would just cut that out of the money they give us anyway. So they may do that anyway. All I'm saying is we need to, let's be clear.
If I could just respond.
I don't want, we're having dialogue now.
I know, okay.
Are you finished, Nutter?
He didn't ask, but I'm asking.
He didn't ask. I mean,
Okay.
oh, we're gonna
I think it's
send him a
important.
reprimand.
One of the important distinctions that I'm making in my mind, okay, first of all, you have this stellar program. We need to make sure that the support continues to that program. And the impacts and all that, that's separate. But when you talk about the maintenance in our schools, that responsibility lies with the city, and we are making progress after decades of just neglect, really. We are making progress working with the city to see that that has to change. So we are staying the course that the city is going to take responsibility for maintaining their buildings. And we're reaching out to the state for help with that, because we are not the only district who has schools in disrepair and heating problems and boilers that are breaking down. You know, this is, as the mayor mentioned earlier in the meeting, when you're looking, you've got to find money and you're looking at cutting people and maybe pushing off on some maintenance issues, the maintenance issues get pushed off because that's easier than losing positions. So I do see that there is a distinction between these two areas. And I know that we would not be cutting adult education or dismembering it, but by not keeping it on our side, we're not ensuring that the funding remains with it.
Okay. Can I make a correction? You said threatened. I believe the word was informed. Okay.
Semantics.
Before, I'd have to make a statement on this, Mr. Nutter. The thing is, you're asking the person who actually wrote the full-time adult ed grant and hired Fred Abbasi, okay, to, I just believe strongly that this program belongs in the educational side because it has so much merit tying itself to our children, the parents and children. I understand you're not trying to destroy the program. I mean, that's clear. But it's where it comes from. But I strongly believe it's in the school department. That's where I'm at. So we'll have a roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
No.
Mr. Hoey?
No.
Mr. Lay?
No.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
No.
1 yea, 5 nays, 1 absent. I'm sorry, Mr. Dakota absent. 1 absent, motion fails.
Thank you. Next, we have, okay, by Mr. Nutter, school committee vote to change the district to a 3-zone transportation placement system effective for 2019, 2020, and begin notifying all stakeholders. I believe we have speakers. Madam Clerk.
Ty Chum?
I just need you to come up, say your name, state your name and address. Okay.
Sorry, it's getting hot in here.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ty Chum. I'm from the Highlands. I'm here to speak on a motion. I feel very disappointed, frustrated, and sad at the same time about the motions. I think it's way too quick. You know, my question is, how much an outreach have the school committee or the school itself done to reach out to the whole communities, all of the communities, in educating the community itself about rezoning? What is rezoning? I have to do my own research and ask
Excuse
people.
me,
Yep.
I need a second for your motion. I didn't, Mr. Hoey, thank you. I apologize.
No way. So basically, I just want to know more how much an education outreach to the communities, you know, how much an effort, if there's a data on it, what is the community input and feedbacks, you know, those are very important. As a parent, you know, it's my first time, I just start learning about the school system and it's way confusing. You know, rezoning is important. How do we actually, you know, communicate it in a way that, you know, in different language that makes sense, which is very important. When I see 2019, 2020 to be implemented right away, that's kind of, I got no word for it. How about that? It's frustrating, you know. You're sending like a panic attack to a lot of people. And it's not right. I understand, you know, the main idea is to save money, to have money in the pocket, to do something better. It's not? Okay, then I apologize for that. But I thought it was for, like, you know, saving monies and getting allocating the money the right way. But in a sense, I want to say that money cannot buy the relationship, the bonds, that students, teachers, and parents have built. You know, don't look at it. When you look at it, those are very important. Money shouldn't be the first thing to look at. You know, it's a struggle enough just to have parents to trust teachers in school, to have parents trust their kid with these, you know, going like from 9 to 5. So it's, all I'm saying is this is another way. There have to be another way to look at it. Please do more community outreach. Please educate the whole communities in their language that makes sense to them. You know, the one-on-one class, something like that, so they could get involved more. I'm looking right now, something that's affect like 45, like the whole community itself. There's only a few people here. That's kind of disturbing, you know. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Darcy Boyer, please.
What?
Darcy Boyer, Lowell, and I concur with Ty. I believe that we definitely need to put more thought into this. It may well be a really great motion. I don't know, because we haven't talked about it. And so I would definitely want to encourage that we have an extensive community participation in this. As with everything we talk about here, right? Superintendent searches, HR directors, we need community input to make this a successful change. So anyway, thank you, Ty, for expressing what I hadn't planned on expressing, but thank you all.
Monica Lundberg.
My name is Monica Lundberg. I live at 12 Alyssa Drive in the Highlands. My son's in kindergarten. We just started in the Lowell schools. And I am, quite frankly, Mr. Nutter, appalled by this notion. The very wording of it, to change the system and then begin notifying stakeholders. That is not how democracy is supposed to work. You need to engage the stakeholders before you make decisions that are going to impact every student in this district. Because changing the zoning is going to impact every single student in the district. If, as the early estimates from when this idea was first floated last week are correct, that 50% of our students would have to switch schools, that's going to have massive ramifications. What is that going to do to the classrooms, to the teachers who are going to be faced with a room full of students who don't know each other, who don't know the school, who don't know its culture? Think about the chaos the first couple weeks of school. And those of you who have kids in the school system, you know, have you ever heard all of the parents complaining about all these kindergarten parents? They do not know the drop-off. They do not know the drop-off routines. They need to learn. Now imagine that that's every grade. Multiply that by every grade. And that's what you'd have with a proposal like this. You would have schools that are full of kids who are freaking out because they've been torn away from their friends, their teachers, everything that they know. And that is going to have massive repercussions on the climate of the classroom. I also have questions about what this would do to the racial diversity in our schools. Has that been looked at? Have we looked at whether this would make our schools more segregated? Our neighborhoods are segregated. If we go to a more neighborhood system, would that not mean that our schools would then become more segregated? That's not what I want. That's not what any of us want. And I believe that's the reason that we don't have neighborhood schools to begin with. I also have concerns about the traffic. If the goal of this proposal is to have fewer buses and fewer students taking the bus, those students still have to get to school. That means they're going to be getting dropped off. How is that going to impact the traffic around our different schools? There are just far too many unknowns with this proposal to be voting on it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole Bernier.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous. It's the first time I've spoken here.
Don't
I
be.
wanted to say thank you to Mr. Lay and Mr. Nutter. I spoke to them both on the phone this week when I noticed this proposal came up. I wrote a letter to all the school committee members, and I wanted to express my concern about this motion. My child is a child that goes to a citywide school, and so this would impact her.
Can you put the mic up a little closer, because we want to make sure our television audience,
Okay.
gets.
So my daughter goes to a
Thank you.
citywide school. Oh, back up. I live in the Highlands. 60 Hawthorne Street in Lowell. Thank you, Mr. Lay. Thank you, Mr. Nutter, for speaking with me this week. Our daughter loves the school she attends. She's thriving there. And as parents, we're very pleased with her educational experience and our connection with the school. And that being said, I was very concerned about this motion to rezone the school district based on growing transportation expenses. It seems like that was kind of the bottom line with this. As a businesswoman, I understand the need to analyze and be willing to make hard decisions such as this to save money when needed. However, I think that with regards to a child's school and their education, these types of decisions are very complex and nuanced, and they need to be made after much consideration, and analyzing it, looking at the long-term effects of this kind of change, and this needs to be carefully considered and explored before making any kind of a vote. I was surprised to learn that the plan was moving forward so quickly. And I felt that other parents, teachers, and community members did not really know about this, this potential change, which would affect about 45% of the students in the district. This could happen within the next several years. It's surprising to me. I was relieved when members of the school committee and the acting superintendent recognized that this dramatic change cannot happen that quickly and kind of slowed it down. And that parents, caregivers, teachers, principals, community members need to be notified of this type of vote that was going to happen here in the chambers. Personally, I feel that if the city of Lowell were to decide to rezone, our parents, teachers, community members, everyone would need to weigh in on this decision and be part of the conversation about how this would unfold. I think it would be a multi-stepped process. I think it would have to be done very carefully and potentially given a vote on a ballot. I think it's that disruptive to our community. In addition, I feel that...
I'm just going to need you to sum up.
Okay. In addition, I feel that if this issue is centrally about money, then we need to understand all options and all avenues that could help the city realize these savings. We spoke about a MIT professor with an algorithm. We had a potential UMass Lowell involved in this. All of these things need to be thoroughly explored. And I think that's very important. One of the most appealing aspects of this district to me as a parent was that I did have school choice. And the changing this would completely change the culture and the equality and the trajectory of the way the school system is moving, the direction that we're taking. And each family, for a myriad of reasons, chooses the school that they want their child to go to. I'm sorry. And I think that it's really important to keep in mind that we need to give families choices. And thank you all very much for your time, your service. And just again, I think the community needs to be really, really involved, and they should have a voice and part of this conversation. Thank you.
I don't mean to try to cut you short, but we have follow the rules. Thank you. Very good presentation. Okay, now to the school committee. Mr.
Thank you. Let me begin by saying, this isn't just about money. I have found no statistics that tell me it is better to keep students on a bus for an extra 75 minutes a week than what the proposal is when we turn this, if we turn this into a 3-zone system. Right now, our students are on a bus for an average of 35 minutes one way. Under the proposal by Mr. Dakota, that would be cut to 20 minutes. That's 15 minutes a day less that we'd have students on the bus. I've talked to a number of parents who don't get their first or second choice. I know of parents who moved to the city this year. They had one student sent down the street from where they live. They had another sent across to Pawtucketville and another sent to the Bartlett. I can't find any the diversity of the schools, the diversity of the city would stay the same under Mr. Dakota's plan. The city entered into a voluntary desegregation program. We have reached a point where we're able to rezone this and keep the desegregation order in place and meet it. We're taking almost 75 minutes one way and 90 minutes if the child travels back and forth on the bus. We have 8,000 students who take the bus. And we have 5 bridges that are going to be affected by all the work that we bought all the Enel bridges, and we got a Tiger grant to fix them. Some are already underway, others are going to start this year. We have the big fill for the Lord Overpass coming up. We are going to back up traffic all around this city, and your child's 35-minute commute is going to turn into a 40 or a 45-minute commute. When you graduate from 8th grade and go down to Lowell High, you start at a new school with new people that you haven't gone to school before. It's not that traumatic. We all did it. In elementary and middle school, those students are much more easily adaptable. I know it's a major change. I know people don't like change. I know that it's not the school's responsibility, but again, it's something that we are faced with, having to deal with that transportation charge. I am not in favor of piecemealing this program in and say, we're going to start with Pawtucketville. No, wait a minute, we're going to start with South Lowell. No, wait a minute, let's start instead with Belvedere. We're going to start with 10%, 5%, 15%. Why? Why are we cherry picking, and who's going to decide? Because I'm not going to decide which section we're going to start if we piecemeal this program in. We do it all at once. It's painful, but it's painful for everyone. The amount of money we could save is somewhere possibly between $600,000 and $800,000. We heard from an MIT professor the other night who's saying if we listen to his algorithms, we could save up to $1 million. However, of that $1 million, he gets $200,000. And any savings after that, he gets a percentage for 5 years. We have a plan by our own staff person who, by the way, the professor was very impressed that we have, that Mr. Dakota has some buses doing 4 schools. He was amazed by that. And he said, you have a great guy there. Well, we do have a great guy there. And he's come up with a system. He presented this. This has been talked about for years before I even get on the school committee. It is not new to this city. It's been talked about forever. It's just reached a point now where we need to do something. Find me someplace that says it's better to keep a student on a bus. Because to me, and find me it's better to send kids across the river, away from your home. Find me a study that says it's good to have one sibling on one side of the river and send the other to the other side of the river. It makes no sense what we do. And under the desegregation order, under the plan by Mr. Dakota, we can have diversity, have no child cross the river, cut down on the time the students are on a bus, and at the same time, save some cash for other programs. That's why I brought it in. Did I expect it to get voted on and approved for next year? Probably not. But this school committee needs to be committed and willing to make a change and come up with a plan to make a change and telling where else, aside from being pregnant, where you get a 9-month notice, What other notice do you get when your life has changed? When you get evicted, if you're lucky, you get 90 days. If somebody gets a new job or loses a job, you don't get a 30-day notice or a 90-day notice. We're telling the residents of this city that either we can't communicate effectively in 6 months or you can't understand us in 6 months. That's insulting. This is February. Nothing would happen for 6 months. That's plenty of time to notify everyone. And if it isn't, then we're not doing a good job. Again, if we keep doing the same thing, nothing's going to change. So we should at least move forward with a plan. Something. We can't keep kicking this down the road. It was brought up when they talked about Lowell High School. It was brought up then. It was brought up about changing all the start times. It's been brought up year after year after year. It's time we do something. It's our, aside from health insurance and salaries, it's our fastest growing issue that we have. And now with all the work that's going to be done around this city, traffic is going to be even worse. And keeping these kids on a bus, I see nothing good about that. Thank you.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Anna. I'd like to say I agree with Mr. Nutter that transportation has been the bane of our existence, you know, spending money and kids on buses and just that whole snafu. But we have made progress in this area over the years since I've been paying attention, and I think we do have an excellent transportation director. But I also think we have another option beside this draconian approach, and I have a substitute motion to that effect, which I don't know how to, you know, bring that in, but I think that would be using the talent we have in-house, our transportation director, to work very closely with the MIT group to develop some options for us that can be phased in, that would allow the community time to weigh in and allow us time to really digest what are the steps that we can take in the near term and down the road that will get us to spending less time on buses and crossing rivers and definitely less money on transportation. So
At a city council meeting, what's the cost of working with the MIT people?
So the plan, if I could continue with that, the cost would be 20% of the savings. And that's only if there's savings, and it's only if we choose to go with his plans. And he could come up with different options for us that would be presented to us. And we can do, as I said, we could just look at the routes. And the professor from MIT did comment, as Mr. Nutter said, he was impressed with what we were already doing, that we have buses that are doing 3 runs, 3-tiered buses. That's impressive. But that doesn't mean that's all we can be doing. And to bring in some other experts to work with our team here and come up with some proposals for us that we're not locked into taking, and if we do take, we're only paying 20% of the savings. And as, you know, obviously the more we're willing to change, if we change school start times, and if we change the zoning, and if we do away with citywide schools, we'll have the most savings. But we can stagger and have different options about how we phase in those savings so that there's time for the community to, you know, participate, understand what the challenges are, and just really present us with some studied options. And I think that really is the smartest way to go. I don't think that this kind of blow everything up based on one presentation that we had is enough.
Okay.
That we should.
Do you mind holding off your motion at this point? I mean, because I have an issue hiring somebody from the outside to do something that we already do pretty well. And I mean, I did at one point do some busing and what have you. And you actually, you want to save more money, you become more draconian in your changes and what have you. But the thing is, I'd like to leave this open for discussion before we bring somebody else in. Ms. Martin, you had your hand up?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think it was great that so many members of the committee and certainly of the community too were able to attend the Transportation and Finance Subcommittee the other night. I did find it very interesting. I think what I came away with, in terms of kind of my concerns around the specifics of this motion. First off, and I think it's a valid point, the idea that we, can inform people of the change, I don't think that's a big challenge. Personally, I just don't think that's the right way to do this. I think to make an across-the-board decision and then just tell people that that's what it is not the best way for us to implement a positive change for our community. The idea of taking the time to ensure that stakeholders are involved in the decision, not just simply informed of it, so that we have every aspect of our community involved in making this dramatic change to our district. So from my perspective, there's no way that can happen in time for the next school year. There's simply no way. That's what takes the time. It's not a matter of getting information out. We can all do that. It's a matter of truly listening to our families, to our students, to our staff, and really making a well-informed decision where we can really weigh the benefits and the negatives of both sides of the argument. From the subcommittee meeting earlier this week, I think the most compelling aspect of what the MIT presentation had was that they would be building for us a modeling program. They would be building us a computer program that would utilize this, I don't know, amazing algorithm. Great word, but anyways. And so there you go. But
well said.
Again, English major, what can I tell you? These algorithms, it's a bit much. But that would allow us to be able to take all of our real-time information, obviously with all the confidentiality, constraints that need to come with that. But we'd be able to put into this system every single student, every single school choice, every single possibility of school time, school assignment, percentages, all the different aspects and opportunities that we may have to make these changes and be able to make well-informed decisions that would allow us to translate these decisions into real dollars. Because I think otherwise we're throwing numbers around we don't know. I mean, even from the presentation the other night, you save $1 million, you save 600, you save 3. I mean, it's all over the map. Until we have real-world data, I don't think we can make that kind of determination to have a really strong sense of what the real dollar value is of changing school start times or any aspect of this. Another concern that I have is that, we talk about, the consent decree like it's something to avoid. To my way of thinking, the consent decree has not only resulted in an amazing number of, we still call them our new schools, even though they're 30 years old, but, a building boom that happened in our district that absolutely changed the face of this city. The consent decree is also responsible for our district having in place, in a wildly diverse community where we celebrate it and tout it and talk all the time about how important it is that we are a diverse community and that we respect it and honor it. The plan of changing to this 3 zones, I think one of the implications of that is that part of the reason why it still falls within the consent decree is that you're looking at the full zone. When we first were implementing these changes, it was a school-by-school ratio that we were looking at. You were looking at the diversity in terms of a 10%, over/under at the Moody School or at the Robinson, so that each school was required to maintain a level of diversity as a unit. This new 3-zone plan means that the 10 schools in that zone collectively will be diverse, will have that diversity number. That's different. I mean, in a community we really do have very, very different kind of neighborhoods surrounding our schools. I think there's a real potential for us to find ourselves in a more segregated situation. And to me, that is absolutely antithetical to everything that this district has been working towards for decades. So those are my concerns. I just think that it is a topic, and I think it is something we should be discussing and we should be investigating, but there is a great deal of information facts, data we need to have before we can even begin to come up with an implementation strategy. Thank you.
Mr. Hoy.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, what I got out of that meeting, I thought was a great meeting. I think we need to move. I don't want this to die because I feel that, and I've never really got along great in the first year with Mr. Dakota, but that was different issues. I think his idea right now, I was really impressed with it. I think there's some issues, there's no doubt about it, like the citywide schools and how are we not going to cross bridges when we have to transport Catholic kids, Catholic students across the bridges. So there are problems with it, but I think now that I've been listening to Mr. Dakota about different issues, I think this is a great motion to keep alive. I don't want it just to die because Mr. Nutt is trying to push it out for next year. But I'm going to support that motion the way it sits, only because I think it's something we finally have to do. I'm not saying it's going to get closer to neighborhood schools, because the only way we're ever going to do that is if you can push them to build another school on the other side of the bridge right now. Then we might be able to do that. But I love this motion. I think it's time that we do move on something, and I don't want that to die. All the information that I got the other night, I thought it was unbelievable, so I'm going to support it.
Mr. Nutter, then Mr. Lay.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Hoey's support. I fully expected this motion. I fully expected this motion to not pass. But I want to offer my own substitute motion to my own motion. And that is, I've heard this discussion go on and on and on. And I want to make sure that we, as a school committee, come up with a solution and a definitive answer. So what I would like to do is to make a motion that the school committee proceed to investigate rezoning the city for the 1920-21 school year, allowing Mr. Dakota and the superintendent's office and staff to gather as much information as possible.
Would that include parent meetings?
That would be, we could have parent meetings, but that would give Mr. Dakota and the administration time not only to work with this professor, but Mr. Dakota indicated the other night when he gave his presentation here that UMass Lowell might be interested in getting involved too, but because of the time constraint that I had said I wanted I wanted it this year.
Basically,
So basically,
to seek more information.
to seek more information and work at a plan looking at rezoning for the 2020-2021 school year.
But could I also add, though, to that, is where there's a consent decree, have the solicitor's office look at the legalities of any movement from this.
Well,
I don't want to have this.
That would be part of the any type of rezoning already includes looking at staying in compliance with the dissent decree. We don't need the law office for that. We all know that going in.
No, excuse me. I think you need the law office to approve it and clear it for the city.
Once we come up with a final opinion.
If there's a
final opinion.
Plan, yes.
But once, let's get the plan in place before we worry about, let's look at what our options are. That gives us time to hire or work out a deal with the gentleman from MIT and with Lowell.
Okay. Ms. Starry?
Second on that, if it's a motion.
Actually, okay. We have a second on his motion. The motion was made. I'm sorry.
In order to move forward with the MIT group, we need to have a vote to work with. We have to give them access to our data.
We could do that.
So I think that we could do both things, but we have to include in the motion that we want to work with this study group. Why wouldn't we want to work with this group that's offering this state-of-the-art software? They're going to work with our team. It's going to be real-time make improvements as we go. We could still see savings in September just by changing routes. We don't know that until we give them an opportunity to use their algorithm with our data, but we have to give them, we have to approve giving them that data, which means getting into a contract with them. So that, I mean, without that piece of it, we're delaying. We're not moving forward with the MIT group. I don't know why we think we can solve it all by ourselves, that we wouldn't want to work with this university and
we have the
what they're
university.
offering to bring us. But without that piece of it, I don't
But
think.
it's not a free offer. I would want to see what the fees would be.
The fee is a percentage of the savings.
I understand, but I would like to, I mean.
That
it's
would
one
be
thing to
in
say-
writing when we see the document.
I want to see the document.
That's what I'm asking, that we move forward to preparing the legal contract, the agreement. That doesn't mean we have to approve it, but we look at what would the document say? Because all we have is the meeting that we had the other night. But I'll defer to.
Mr. Hoy?
Yeah, I just want to say, I had a feeling too that trying to get this done by 2019, 2020 would have almost been, we didn't get enough information, so it would be impossible. So I think, Jerry, changing it 1 year, I think we should keep it moving. And I know you want to see things, Mayor, but I know it's not a fee to hire this person to work with John Dakota. It's 20% if he saves us money, that's what he takes, and we get the other 80%. There's no fee to have him here. They've done a lot of work before in the past. So I want this to keep moving. I don't care if it's a year and a half or 2 years, but thanks for the time.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. I do think it's, based on the presentation we received on Monday, I do think that there is the expectation, as it was presented, that we would be seeing significant savings in year one. I mean, the professor was proposing a situation where it would be implemented for September. This 20% return, I think he's anticipating in that first year. If I could, I do think that the best way to move forward would be, as part of the motion, to include an instruction to the administration to reach out to, and I can't do his name justice, I apologize for that.
Sakis?
Sure. To reach out to his company and negotiate what an administration recommended contract for, because I think he may have a different expectation when we present to him that we're looking to kind of build the modeling program, give him the information, and then run these models over the course of a year or so before we perhaps even are able to implement any of the changes. So it does push out when he would be able to anticipate getting paid. So he may want to rethink the way he structures that. But I think that would at least allow the administration to reach out, give him the updated information, and come back to us with an actual contract that over the course of time, even if the Finance and Transportation subcommittees would like to establish a regular meeting time so that they're kind of reviewing this on a regular basis.
Including your motion?
That was it, so go ahead, write that up.
Just, when we were talking.
I have it down here.
When we were talking. When we were talking with the professor the other night, his urgency was the fact that we were looking for the 2019-2020. Now that we're pushing it off a year, that the urgency isn't as great. We can move forward with this, and because one of the other things we need as a committee to do is to set some parameters for him. What are we looking for? Are we looking for, the first year being, what I would like, 45%, or are they looking for 15, or are they looking for, give them some options, and we don't have to do that, maybe until the next meeting when we can discuss it more. Can I defer to the superintendent here?
Madam Superintendent?
I just, to the families that are listening and here in the audience, I know that one of the things that the professor did say that we could actually program it to say no changes. And I'd be interested to see no changes and if in fact with the no changes of children for this year, that that would be something that if we could see savings and it would help to reduce the amount of time students were on buses, that would be beneficial. But I do agree that a year out from now for the planning and all of, making sure that all of our constituents have a voice in this is really important.
That's important.
I just want to clarify, that's when he talked about the different parameters that you put in. And the one about no changes was no changes to school assignments. He could program it that there would be no changes to school assignments, but they'd be looking at routes instead and ways to optimize our routes. And maybe if we could think about if we change school start times, what would that impact be? But I think we can phase in some savings for the fall that would have limited, if any. I mean, because a student doesn't care what the bus number is that they're on, right? They get to go to the same school. There's not a disruption there. That was one of the points that he made. That's where the timeliness comes in, that we want to move forward with this agreement, at least seeing what they're offering in writing, so that we could maybe have some savings for the fall without disrupting families.
If that's the approach, I can support that aspect of the approach. But, Mr. Nutt, I'm going to go back to, I would like to still include, for my support, that at least the city solicitor's office is informed of the process going through. The idea of wait till the end and then a debate at this point, I don't see. I just want, if we're going to go in that direction, the office has not to say, no, we're not going to do it. It has to work with us to do it. I just want the city protected. It's just an inclusion, it's inclusion part of the process. Yes, no.
For that matter, I mean, we have our own lawyer, Mr. Mayor.
I
But anyway, whatever you want to do, that's fine.
Well, that's what the city
If it makes you happy.
Makes me happy. We protect the taxpayers.
That's enough.
Mr. Hoey?
May I know not to throw it up because I know you're a very busy person, but you weren't at that meeting. And
I had another meeting.
That's
too,
okay.
yeah.
But I'm going to put Miss Turner on the spot right now and just ask her just to speak anything that you got out of that meeting, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot like that.
From a business perspective, I thought that we should go with it because he emphasized that we didn't have to commit to anything. He could run the algorithms like we talked about. There were three tiers to it. We could do it with all three or one or two. We could do it where we switch schools for students, switch routes, or just switch the bell times. He said that we can play with the parameters, and whatever the savings are, he would get 20% only if we realized those savings. We could go through the whole project and then decide we don't want to work with him, and I found that very appealing because we could get the ideas, see what it would do, and still minimize the impact to the families while seeing what we would save financially. So I was for it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, roll call.
Are you really going to make Mary read that again? Huh?
That's the whole idea.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, Mr. Lay.
may I have a word or two? I just want to say that Mr. Dakota has gone a long way to come with these 3 zones. He came up with 6 zones, 5 zones, and now 3 zones, and I think this zone is a lot better than before. And just have a feeling that, of course, we cannot do both at the same time. We have to do one program with the MIT professor, or we do this. However, I feel that we have to be very careful, and that the community should have involved in this, and they do have a choice. If they don't like the way that we do, there are charter schools, and there's always towns around here that they can go to, and usually we ended up losing better ones. So we have to do it carefully, and so for Mr. Nutter's motion, I prefer not putting a time limit to it because it may take more than a year. This is a very massive change, so I would support it if you have an open date rather than have it done by the next school year.
But I believe what he said is get the process going for the next school year. And
No, I'm keeping it for the 2020-2021 school year.
do you want to review your substitute motion that was passed? Which will
You want to read it, Mary?
Which will also include.
I don't know if I have it correct, but it says substitute motion for the school committee to proceed to investigate the rezoning for the 2021 school year, and to also include the review from the city solicitor's office.
But also, in order for the expert from MIT, he needs approval to
So
certain type of information, so.
I can read this. I can also add, with what you have, that also to have the superintendent take the necessary steps to draft a legal agreement between the Lowell School Committee and Professor Demetrius Barsamis and his company regarding working with the district to save on student busing and transportation costs.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
But the thing is, as that information comes forward, it'll be sent to the subcommittee on finance so we can keep.
And transportation. We'll keep scheduling joint committees and keep the public informed as we go along.
That's, okay. Ms.
Just one point of clarification. Are you saying you're not interested in savings for the 1920 school year if they can come up with some?
That would just be a bonus, but we're looking to try to.
Right. That would only be without major disruptions,
Exactly,
but
yeah.
you're not against
Oh, no.
savings
Oh,
for the 2000. Well, you said you
I'll
were
take
keeping it
savings
to the
wherever I can get 'em,
2021
Jack.
year. Okay, good.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
I'm just curious, how could we be confident that we have this done in a year, though? I mean, if at the time that you don't.
I have faith in us. I have faith in our ability. We're gonna change the way this whole city votes in less than a year. So, if we're gonna do that by 13 people, we're smart enough to do this.
I am not against this at all, but I am just against the time limit that we have. So I'm not going to vote to support it because the time is too short. I don't think.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
No.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 5 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent, approved.
All right. No, we go on to something else. No more motions. All right, subcommittee, Personnel Subcommittee, report and approval of the minutes. I need a motion. Oh, we'll do it by city council. I just need a second on your motion. By Ms. Doherty. Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. So the Personnel Subcommittee did meet on Monday, the 28th. Present from the committee were myself, Ms. Doherty, and Mr. Hoey. Also present from the school committee were Mayor Samaras, Mr. Dakota, Mr. Nutter, and Mr. Lay. Obviously, we had a big turnout. We were called together to discuss establishing a process for the selection of a new superintendent. I would actually kind of consider this in the same vein as some of our earlier motions. We did have a conversation just discussing kind of what the priorities would be from the committee's perspective. We certainly tried to, and we got some good responses from the individuals who were able to join us about what their priorities were. I think the key to this is as we move forward, we'll be able to present what the plan will be for involving the community, for having having this process laid out, certainly in as aggressive a way as we can. But to that point, I would say we do have our executive session this evening, so that really will dictate the information and the planning that comes next. So while it was a longer meeting and there are many, many minutes, I think the key is that we need to have our meeting tonight and then be able to move forward. That I'd submit that as a report of progress.
Okay. She's not making any of those motions, just a report of progress.
So I need a motion to accept this as a report of progress. Okay.
Sorry, I know we've spent the whole night on motions, but I thought we had motions on changing the job description from this meeting that we needed to bring forward to the whole. We don't need to do that?
Until we post it, no. Until we decide on the search, we'd bring that would all get submitted. The posting with the changes that we had recommended that night, as well as the actual process, will need to be approved.
Okay.
Again, I know the timing of this is confusing, but with our meeting tonight, we'll resolve many of the questions.
Okay, and when people get their report cards from me tonight, I mean, about not raising their hand, I mean.
This was the HR director one.
Excuse me?
That one we're moving
Yes.
forward with the HR director.
Do it through the the chair.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
So,
but we had changes to the
So,
job
I need a
description.
motion to accept this as a report of progress. Thank you.
by who? Ms. Martin?
Seconded by Mr. Nutter.
And first by Ms. Martin?
And it was made by Ms. Martin. I thought
Okay.
you knew.
I didn't know.
She's giving me a hard time up here.
It's a sad story.
To the satisfaction of a lot of people. Okay. Next, the Personnel Subcommittee meeting, report and approval of the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So 2 days later, the Personnel Subcommittee met yet again. Present was myself, Ms. Doherty, Mr. Hoey. Also from the school committee was Mr. Lay. Our purpose that evening was to discuss the HR audit and to make plans moving forward for beginning our search for the new HR director. We did have in attendance the individuals from Human Resources Services Incorporated, which was the audit firm that had conducted the audit of our HR processes and had gone through the process with our school department. You know, their process did include over 60 individuals that they interviewed throughout the district. They did a great deal of work looking at kind of past practices. They did review, you know, and there is specific position descriptions that they reviewed. I think they paid, which I think was helpful, a good amount of time to really looking at the way people progress through our search system and how people get hired and how the kind of information about potential hires can get bottlenecked within the HR department when we consider that we basically have about 30 different sites that are all responsible in some ways for aspects of the recruiting and hiring process. So I thought she had some good recommendations there. And I think one of the key things that obviously we were focused on was how do we move forward to actually begin this search. Ms. Turner had provided some information about 3 different firms that had responded to the RFP that we had put out to take on this search for us. Included, I'm sure for the committee, we know it was in our packet. It was provided on the website in the packet for anyone who's looking. The 3 different offers, 3 different responses that we received. So I would actually ask Ms. Turner if you could maybe just give, and I'm trying to help the mayor out, like maybe 2 sentences on each one of those and what your recommendation would be to choose.
So as you said, we did have 3 responses. One was for 25% of the asking price, so I based that on, well, not the asking price, but the assumed salary. So I used $100,000 as my assumed salary. 25% was one, 20% was another, and one agency, a local agency, did a flat fee of $14,000, which is equivalent to 14% versus the 20 and 25. I do recommend that firm. I feel like they specialize in diversity recruitment, so that would be my recommendation.
So I would actually make a motion to the full school committee that we accept the recommendation of the administration to move forward with, and I don't have the name of the
LEAP Net.
The LEAP Network? The LEAP Network proposal, and immediately begin the process of recruiting for a new HR director for the Lowell Public Schools.
I need a second by Mr. Nutter. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
I would submit that as a very succinct report of progress.
I need a motion to accept that as report by Mr. Nutter. Thank you. Next, we have reports of the superintendent. Response to Mr. Hoey's motion of January 16th, 2019 regarding how many 51As have been filed. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as you said, this is in response to Mr. Hoey's motion around 51As. We just started to track the number of 51As in November of 2017. So I wanted to give you an assessment of where we were November 27th, 2017 through February 2nd, 2018. It was a 2-month time, for a little over a 2-month time frame. And during that time, there were 127 51As filed by school social workers across the district. This year, from September 1st, 2018, through December 30th, 2018, at the time of the report, they were just gathering the remainder of the January data. That's 4 months worth of time, 179 51As filed across the district. So if you have any questions.
Mr. Hoey.
First of all, thank you, Madam Superintendent. My motion, I probably didn't ask for enough because, not that I'm disappointed in what you've told me, but I think I wanted to hear, what the 51As are, not to know the child's name, just the cases. I'm trying to focus on mental health. I want it not to grow into something that's going to cost us a lot of money. And I just like to maybe get another report about what schools it's coming from, all these calls, because we might be able to look at that like we're going to look at exit interviews. We're going to look at things like 51As, and there's certain schools, if they have too many, we might be able to focus, or it's a tool for me to focus on where we might need some resources. Because when I look at my iPad on a daily basis, all I see is a lot of ambulance trips to hospitals. I see quite a few of them. I know my wife recently took an ambulance trip from Barica to Lowell General, cost us $2,500. And all I ever see is a student being taken out of a school, sent to Lowell General for mental health issues. And those are things I want to know. I want to know what schools those 51As have been written up in case that would help us. And I know you told me we can't obviously say the child's name, but I can't see why we can't find out what the abuse was.
Mr. Hoey, can I just?
Yes.
That does become problematic, because if you zero in on the school, a lot of the other children or teachers know the case. So once you start naming the case and bring up specifics, then people will be able to identify, and we have to protect that.
Okay,
But
Mayor.
the thing is, I think there's two things. I mean, to get the number of needs, there are some schools, it's not because of the teachers or the administration, it's you have a group of children that are really in need of services. So that's one issue. But I think the superintendent can give you, in general, some of the issues that have been raised. In other words, maybe lump them together, lump certain areas because of, we'll say, family abuse, certain areas are because of mental health issues. Do you want something like that?
Okay. And Mayor,
Try to give you the information you want.
what I'm more concerned about really, then I'll
without
bring it down.
endangering
I'll bring it down to something small. I'm concerned on what schools write the most. Where is that happening the most? You probably can show us a few schools that might stand above other schools that this is happening, where the ambulances, I've been trying to keep track, but there's so many, it's almost impossible. So I do want to see about the ambulance trips, who's paying for the ambulance trips, and what schools these 51As are coming out of. And I don't need to maybe hear what the 51As are for, but I think when you do start looking at things, and without using names, people will see that we have some really big issues that we got to deal with when it comes to mental health. I'm sorry if I said something I maybe shouldn't have, but I think we have to put a focus on this as hard as I want to.
This is a good area, too, Madam Superintendent.
51.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Mr. Hoey, that this is an area that we do need to focus on. I think that's why we started to ask our school social workers to track some of the data. The 51As only tell a small little snippet of the picture, however. So a 51A might, because we're mandated reporters, we're mandated by law to refer, not to investigate. DCF's job is to investigate. So many times when we make a referral, we're making a referral even thinking that it doesn't meet the threshold of neglect or abuse. But we have to do that by law. And many times it's screened out, and it's something that maybe there's a slight correction that we make in our particular areas, but also many times these 51As aren't filed relative to our schools per se. It may be something outside of the school. So, but there are other factors that we are tracking, and perhaps I could bring those forward to you so that you could see that, and that might help you to see the different scope of the ambulance calls and all of that. We are tracking that now, so I'd be happy to bring that forward to you.
And the last thing I want to say, thank you, Mr. Durkin, but the last thing I want to say is sometimes I worked in a different trade than educators or teachers, but sometimes people are written up 51A on an employee, and that's another issue that we have to keep an eye on, because I would never think a principal would ever think about writing up one of their staff members for the wrong reasons. But things like that happen. I know teachers have to be nervous right now inside some of these schools. I even asked a social worker recently, she almost turned blue. I seen she was very small, and I said to her, "Have you ever been hurt?" And everybody around me couldn't believe I asked her that question, but you do get hurt on these jobs. And I'm not saying it comes from these poor kids that are getting abused, but all these issues have to be dealt with. I'm just concerned with, right now, ambulance, how many we're sending out, who's paying for them, and what schools these 51As or calls to DCF are being made. And I know you did great for me already, Ms. Durkin, and I know next time out I'll probably be totally satisfied. It was my motion that probably didn't give you enough information to bring me tonight, so thank you again.
Next, we have Emergency Impact Aid Grant. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, this will be quick. It's just to give you a notification that we were awarded additional $13,000 of funding to support our students who are homeless. And this will be able to be utilized for tutoring services and other supports throughout the summer months.
Okay. Next, we have STEM Academy Expansion Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is in regards to the known expansion of the Rogers STEM Academy. Unfortunately, there wasn't a distinct plan in place for the additional 4 classes that we need to have for the STEM Academy. So in the fall, the members of our leadership team, along with the Family Resource Center coordinator and the business manager for transportation, took a good look at school enrollment district-wide to try to ascertain if there was any kind of movement we could do. In addition to that, we convened meetings with city officials, including the chief financial officer, purchasing manager, deputy director of the Department of Planning and Development, and our staff to ascertain the feasibility of acquiring a building that was owned by the city that could be refurbished and made into a school. We also looked at not only the city-owned buildings, but we looked at a discussion of a timeline for putting together an RFP and what would be the realistic time frame. Would we be able to be ready for the fall when school opened? And so the short answer to those questions with the city was that unfortunately the buildings that they own wouldn't be suitable, and there's a reason they're still available, that there were a number of repairs that would need to be made. In addition, we were told by city officials that the RFP process would have needed to start a year ago. So we are starting that now, so that in a year we will have a plan. So I just wanted to share with you what we've done relative to the STEM Academy. We've verified the occupancy of the STEM Academy, that it can in fact hold additional students. Not the best case scenario, but it can. We've also had the fire chief, the fire department out to inspect that as well. We've conducted multiple tours of the STEM Academy to determine potential viable spaces for classrooms and what the construction would be needed. We were the whole time trying to do the least amount of movement because this staff and these students have been impacted for several years now. Each year being told just one more year. So we also spoke with the police chief because they have a police precinct there, and that precinct would need to move out of that space. But we also identified space in the building that if they chose to, they could move to with some retrofitting. We also have a very large community teamwork program there, and we're looking at either splitting that program into 2 other schools or one school and keeping the students who are specifically Rogers STEM Academy students there. We've communicated with the city manager as well to determine if they could put the Rogers STEM Academy on the docket for work to be done this summer and commit to us having it completed in time for school to begin, or if they would afford us the opportunity to select our contractors and then pay the bill. I'm waiting to hear from the city manager. She's talking to her team about that, and I hope to hear by the end of the week, early next week, because we do need to start that going. In addition, I met with the STEM Academy staff this week on February 5th to discuss the proposed plan. I've consulted with the UTL because this plan may require 1 or 2 staff members to be on carts for, again, a 1-year time frame. I've asked them to believe me when I say that. We've scheduled a meeting with the STEM Academy School Site Council on February 26th. And any other parents that would like to attend, and schedule a meeting with city officials for the RFP process so that in a year from now we're not in this situation. So that's where we are right now with the proposal for next year. When we really looked at the numbers and we looked at, well, we could say to families, you could potentially go back to the school you came from, because if you remember, we recruited children to come to this school, our new STEM Academy. So now those students would have one additional move that they hadn't anticipated. To say to 8th graders who have been at that school, you need to step out and go to another school, it just didn't seem the right thing to do. I know I applaud the staff for taking this and, being willing to take one more year, but I think it's the best recommendation at this time.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for this report. I certainly appreciate it. And it's been something that I know the administration and the committee, we've been struggling with for a long time. I do think that, our Rogers STEM Academy has been an extraordinary success. I think for students and families who've been part of that community, they want to remain part of that community. And I think that, from a small idea in a curriculum subcommittee meeting, we really have, all these years later, created something that is unique within our district and beyond, and is really of great value within our district to have this area of specialty within that school community. So am I right in just reminding myself, so the plan you're proposing will bring in the 4 strands of 8th grade for next year? We'll be able to accommodate that?
2 8th grade.
Okay.
And 2 7th.
Okay.
So
that
every
will
year
allow,
we add.
Okay. And we have removed the preschool classrooms from that school, correct?
That's correct.
They've moved to the centralized site, which freed up classrooms, I know, and I think was a great idea. I think the opportunity to be able to perhaps take over the space of that the police department is using, I'm sure they'll be amenable to that, But I think that, that's great. And it has been wonderful having them there. I know particularly when we were having our meetings there, not so long ago, they were involved with a lot of the basketball leagues, and, it's a great location, but I'm sure we can find something, that will accommodate them just as well. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. The idea that we can bring into, these classrooms without having to invest in portables, without having to do kind of dramatic, really expensive upgrades and changes, I think is a testament to creativity, and I appreciate that. And I think for that school, I think it's great that we're going to be able to let those students continue and be able to build out the school so that it can really accommodate its potential. Thank you.
All set? Okay, next, business office update.
The business office update includes information on the budget transfer, projections, HR update, and process improvements. It's my job to make sure I'm as transparent as possible, and especially with the transfer of that magnitude. So what I did is I summarized what we've gone through. We had to go through the entire budget, figure out what was short, underfunded, what was not allowed with the offsets, and we identified $4.6 million that the general fund would be short when we adjusted all of these entries. We did increase the revenue by the 1.1 in additional Chapter 70, which reduced us to $3.5 million short. When we reduced it again for the two new hurricane relief and emergency relief aid, we were down to the 2.4. We did make those $2.4 million adjustments, and that is what you will see on the transfers. To make it transparent, I attached the modified document, the modified budget document, but what I did is I added a column, 3 columns at the end, so that you could follow along with your transfer, and column 14. Column 14 on the modified document shows the difference between the original general fund and the modified general fund. The reason this is so confusing is because it's like peeling an onion. Typically, you have a budget and it's your cash. This budget was built with coupons, right? So your offset is not a real cash flow. So when I build my munis budget, if the budget in here says 180, I can only put 165 in the munis system. So when I go to make transfers to cut the budget, there's nothing there to cut because it was never a real cash source. So I'm sharing this with you so that you understand the complexities that we faced. So that was one. The first complexity is that they weren't real dollars, so it's hard to cut. The second thing I wanted to do, and I'm proud of this one, the emergency relief grant. That grant, even though it was given to us in FY19, it was an FY18 grant. So what they were doing is they were giving us money backwards, which would have caused the money to flow into the city's free cash again, which again, we would have the problem of having to fight for it. So we worked with Jay Sullivan at the Department of Ed and the state auditors, and what we did is when we had to set up that FY18 budget, we worked with the city auditor and said, we now want to transfer the cost that we had incurred under circuit breaker. We want to move those costs and move it over to the grant and expend the grant so nothing flows through their cash flow. Because circuit breaker is a revolving account, when we did that, it freed up the revolving account and moved the funds to this year. So we now can use those funds instead of letting them take it in free cash. My point of sharing that is you're not going to see a dollar for dollar match, because what I did is I adjusted things like this. I didn't increase the budget or decrease the budget by the exact 4.6. I would change things on emergency relief. I reduced the amount we would need in special ed out of district tuition because now the circuit breaker can fund that. I also wanted to tell you that as we were going through the transfers that you did approve along the way or agree to, some of them we could not do because the funds were already spent. So by the time, even if we said, oh, we'll allow a $30,000 recruitment expense to be reduced, by the time we've made these transfers, now other costs have hit those accounts because there's nowhere to hit the accounts anymore. So I wanted to let you know that we did adjust for that in the transfer. I also wanted to let you know that the city, when we did get the additional $1.1 million, they put it into a suspense account. That's included in the transfer. And the hurricane relief. The hurricane relief funds were, I originally was showing that in my reconciliations as additional revenue. Now I actually just went into an account and moved it from the general fund into a grant line. So you'll see it as more of a reduction to an expense. All in all, that transfer includes my modified budget document so that you could follow along, And then today, right before we came here, I summarized all of the changes, and I put that on, I handed that to each of you, and I'll upload it tomorrow. What this summary document does is it shows the original budget based upon Chapter 70 city financing and our expenses. Then I showed it as a modified document so that you could see how it increased once we modified it to reflect the real availability. And then I did another column showing after we complete the transfer. So when all these numbers start to mix and you get confused, it's not mistakes, it's just that there's been a lot of moving parts. So that was the budget transfer. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay.
Mr. Nutter?
I don't have any questions. I, again, just want to point out to people the remarkable job that you have done untangling this. And people need to realize that, in all likelihood, we are going to finish this year either in budget, hopefully, or even if we're, even if we're a little under, it is just because of the hard work and the cuts, and there have been cuts, and there have been positions not filled. I don't want people to think that just because we end up with a balanced budget, that finances aren't too bad. That's wrong. Finances this year were terrible, and we still owe $2 million to the state, and we're starting off $500,000 in the hole for next year that we can't charge to indirect cost. So it is because of your efforts and the team that is sitting in front of us that have made us successful this year, and I want to thank you for that.
Madam Superintendent?
I just wanted to echo it. Ms. Turner is quite eloquent when she shares her information with you, but behind that are hours and hours of really going through each aspect of it and making sure there are checks and balances along the way. So I want to applaud her as well.
Thank you. This is what we needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also wanted to just say that you're absolutely right. We're going to come in within budget because we're working to do it. If you lose your job and you cut your cable bill and you're doing fine, but then you realize you're still going to be short, then you cut the telephone. And then you cut and you go and eat macaroni and cheese, right? So that's what we're doing right now. If I find that these projections that we're doing are going over, I think I've emphasized each time that when I made these cuts, it wasn't a good idea. It's just that we have no choice right now because there's no alternative. So when I bring the projections to you each month so that you can start to learn and watch the flow with me, if we see that we're going over, we're going to have to make more cuts on sick leave buyback or things like that as we go. So I thank you for recognizing that because I will keep us within budget, but with sacrifice. The second thing I wanted to point out is the projections. As I explained, if I start to show you the flow and the counts, then you'll start to understand why it's so volatile and why one minute I might say we have a deficit, the next minute I might say we have a surplus. It's not because we're crazy, it's because the numbers actually do flow. So I wanted to point out that the sick leave, we did proactively send out notice to the staff, and we've been bombarded with all kinds of retirees. The bad news is that we're getting bombarded, but the good news is that now we have an ongoing projection. We can tell you how many people are retiring, what our liability is on any given day, and we have some happy retirees because now we're responding to their needs. We're offering a workshop and things like that. The last time I reported to you on this, we had 24 that had already retired, and then we had 25 in the queue. Now we have 27 in the queue, and if you add up what we've already spent, the $453,000 and the $927,000 in liability, our total would be $1.3 million, which is more than the 1.1 that I suggested putting back. However, I'm not freaking on that yet because they could use their sick time between now and then, so at this point, I'm just sharing this information. The transportation numbers, to watch that flow, homeless transportation increased by 23 students since the last time we met. The in-district student count increased by 30 students. Luckily, the transportation director is being creative and working with Pride Star and NRT and adding students onto existing routes. So at this time, that we're not going to ask to do anything with the transportation budget. By the way, with the homeless, with the 23 student increase, that does make our cost go up. However, we do expect a 33% reimbursement for the homeless transportation, so we're counting that in to offset this problem. The out-of-district tuition, that increased by 3 students, which would have cost us $100,000 prorated, because as we pointed out earlier, when the public needs to know that this does cost a lot of money. Prorated for the rest of the year, 3 students would cost us $100,000, but luckily, the special ed team, they've been, trying to fight and bring kids into the least restrictive environment, so there have been some offsets. So at this time, no change to the budget. The next, before I move on, any questions with the projections? No, okay. The next thing was the human resource update. I did put that in a memo that you have, which was giving you the options, but I also wanted to point out that even with us moving ahead now, we're still not going to see anyone in that seat until sometime in mid-April, because we have to meet with the selected company. We have to analyze and approve the job description with the firm, and then they're going to start the search and outreach, and then the interviews would begin, final interviews, offers and negotiations, and then the selected candidate would still have to give a 2-week notice. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. And then I wanted to let you know, in response to the HR audit that we did, that was presented, I do have, and it's going on this week's for next week, it's a response to each of those findings, so that you know that the findings were based upon information that we all shared with them about what we identified in the school district. So we've been working on the responses prior to it being released. One thing is, we do not need a new platform. We do not need new technology. Our current systems are, one, the staff is trained on it already, so we don't need additional changes right now. And 2, I was here when we implemented, I think Munis was almost $1 million, if not more. Munis does everything that they were talking about. Munis they can post applications, post jobs. The applicants can go on. That allows us to track diversity, which would solve the problem with the election lawsuits and stuff like that. It would send out letters of, sorries, and it would offer the jobs. Then the person would we would only have to press one button and it would switch over to active employee. So it's an applicant and it goes over. One stop. Instead of continuing to dissect our systems and add more and more platforms, we need to just work with the city to utilize all of the functions we have. So with that said, I had worked with Miran Fernandez with the city, and he and I are going to schedule a Munis investment analysis, because Munis is fully paid for, all of the components. They're going to come in, see what we're currently doing, and then they will help give us a free report, because everything's paid for, free training, and tell us how to implement all of these corrections. So I just wanted to let you know we are on top of that. And then last but not least, the process improvements. We're trying, that is what our main job has been, is to just identify broken systems and try to implement changes. 2 that I'm going to throw on this one, and the rest I'll wait till next week. 2 that we're working on is, the city went paperless in 2016. We're currently not paperless. We're offering paperless. We offer electronic pay stubs. That costs the city more money and more time to, like cutting paper checks and all. So we have worked with the unions to notify them. We're going to send out emails to let the staff know we're going entirely paperless by July 1st, which is the prelude to what we do with Munis when we end up doing the self-service for the employees and all of that. And the next one is just the retirement. The process, we increased communication. We summarized the application process and created roadmaps to retirement. We're educating staff. I'm sending out blasts to them to tell them, did you know this about credible service, things like that. We're offering the workshops, and now, as I said in the other piece, we're now doing the projections ongoing, which helps with this piece. And that's my thing. Did I do it fast enough?
Any questions? I don't think there's anything left.
Yeah, no, I
Thank
did.
you very much. Great report. Next, we have a response to Mr. Nutter's motion of 4419 regarding marijuana screening. Madam Superintendent, or Mr. Nutter?
Nope, thank you for that report.
You're welcome.
All set.
All set. Okay. Next, response to Mr. Nutter's motion of 91918 regarding the feasibility of eliminating February and April vacation.
Again, my batting average tonight is really, really low. But that's okay. Again, we asked the question. People want to keep the vacation. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have enrollment figures. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, this is just your regular enrollment figures. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer.
Next, report on motions.
And the update to the report on motions, if anyone needs clarification or has questions relative to our updates, please don't hesitate to ask.
Okay. I need a motion to accept the reports of the superintendent of 8-1 through 8-8 as report of progress. By Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Doherty. All in favor? Thank you. Then we have the recommended budget calendar. I need a motion to approve the fiscal year 1920 recommended budget calendar. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, I just want for those watching what is currently on the website. I believe it's been changed. We're looking at the Tuesday, June 4th as our last meeting, as the June 5th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting, typically does get canceled at the vote of the school committee because it's our graduation.
Mr. Nutter?
Oh, we might.
Excuse me, hold it, wait. No, Mr. Nutter first.
That was going to be my question. Usually the council meets, but I have no problem bumping them if they, or having ours earlier. The other question is.
I didn't hear that. But
thank you. Have you, just to make sure, I see that the city manager's name is listed on here. Has she and Connor been involved in approving this? Because I know sometimes they present their budget to the city and get it approved by right around the same time. And so we would have to approve ours to get it to her.
I did not get approval. I did map it out. I can get approval just because I looked at the historical city side, but I will reach out to him tomorrow and share. We based it upon the governor's budget.
Right. I know in the past we've been told that, and they usually like to approve, the city likes to approve right around the first week in June so that it can be given to the auditors so that they can get everything ready for July 1st. So I just wanted to check on that. Thank you.
Madam Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just wondering if we might want to change those Tuesday dates to the Monday just before, because you've got the public budget hearing is Tuesday, May 21, and then, the final budget hearing to be, if we did it Monday, June 3rd. So we could change the budget public hearing to Monday, May 20th, and then the final budget meeting to Monday, June 3rd. That would be my recommendation.
So, when we checked, we did check with the city manager's office relative to the council chambers being available, because we know that's kind of the best venue. However,
I also want to be available.
Right, and so we can certainly move it and we'll house it at another school if that's fine with folks. If we do the 4th, we'll do we're going to do Monday the 3rd, June 3rd. Is that what we're looking at? And we'll reserve a school.
May I suggest that we don't vote on this tonight until after you've discussed this with the managers to make sure that we fit in with the city time zone, and then bring us next week? Thank you.
All right. We'll defer this to the next meeting. All right. School committee meeting dates. I need a motion to approve the 2019-2020 school committee meeting dates. Move for approval by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Hoey. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Then the next motion to approve the FY 2019-2020 school calendar. Need a motion to approve. Any issues? Motion to approve by Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Hoey. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Okay, next, I need a motion to accept the grant award of $42,000 to the Robinson School from the Summer Start Foundation for Nature, Art, and Humanities. I need a motion to accept that by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Doherty. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mayor, just for a second, really quick, I want to say, I see the name in here of a new basketball coach. His name is Dan Sargent, and they're ready to send 27th grade students from the Robinson School to the Yellowstone National Park. I believe it's only 2 years that they've done that, but it's an amazing thing. And last night, by the way, in case you didn't know, our new basketball coach, Dan Sargent, the same guy, brought the Lowell High girls into the high school with an 8-8 record that started off with a very poor record for his first year, brought it up to 8-8, and last night we did lose to Andover. Everybody was wondering about the Patriots, and I was hoping the girls won last night, but it's an amazing team how they've been turned around, and for a first-year coach and going to Yellowstone Park, he's having quite a year. So thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
And budget transfer, motion to approve the budget transfer of $4,079,144. I need a motion to approve by Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Hoey. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Next, we have a donation acceptance for Lowell STEM clubs. Motion to accept the donation of $1,000 for the Lowell STEM clubs. I need a motion to accept by Mr. Hoey, second by Ms. Martin. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Then we have convention conference request for the athletic director at no cost. Motion to approve the conference request.
Move to
Mr.
approve.
Hoey, seconded by Mr. Nutter. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter? Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Communication, a letter of appreciation from Jeffrey Bilby for his 40 years of service to the Lowell public school system. I need a motion to accept and place on file by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Hoey.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I'd like to just speak on that for a minute. Ms. Durkin, thank you very much for writing the letter. I think we can waste another minute on a man that put 40 years into our system. He's a custodian that works up at the Morey School, and when you walk in, you could eat off his floors. What I'm really worried about is him leaving. I know he's already probably gone right now. If not, it's any day. I think he's gone. We might want to put an extra social worker at that school because those children are going to miss this guy. I wish Miss Desmond, by the way, I don't see her here tonight, she probably would speak on this guy, Bilby. I knew his brother. I never met Jeffrey Bilby, but 40 years. We just gave a letter to Manny Silver that runs your McAvenue School, another school, that they have to put a rope on him so he doesn't paint his foundation at that school. That's how clean that school is. But these are two gentlemen. One who had 33 years, one has 40 years. And believe me, they're going to be hard to replace. I hope Rick Underwood has someone to go into that Morey School because it's an unbelievable school, and the way it looks on the inside and outside reflects this guy, Bilby.
Thank you, well said.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Along the same lines, if I could request that, over the Martin Luther King holiday, we had the Green Elch School incident, but we had our custodians going into a lot of our schools and to check on them. And I know of at least 3 or 4 places that because of their dedication, that they stopped other issues from happening.
Would have been a disaster.
It would have been a disaster. So if we could just, speak with Mr. Underwood and send those gentlemen our appreciation from the whole school committee, because they did on their own time, I will add, go into the schools over the weekend to make sure that things were working, and they deserve to be recognized for their dedication to our kids in our schools.
I believe there was an important game going on one of those days. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Good motion. Next, we have a motion, okay. UTL donated sick days. The members of the United Teachers of Lowell hereby donate 7 sick days to Sandra Levesque, the Morris School. I need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
By Mr. Hoey, second by Mr. Nutter. Roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Okay, I need a motion to recess and enter into executive session for the purpose to discuss non-union personnel and updates in considerations to claim for reimbursements, of which open discussion may detrimentally affect the school committee's position, and we will adjourn from executive session. So I need a motion to go into executive session by Ms. Doherty, second by Mr. Lay. I need a roll call.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Meeting adjourned.
Mayor, we're going to adjourn out of executive session. The young man in the back, this is his only second time here, so I think we should tell him he can leave right now, right? I'll tell him.
Thank you.